Hi everyone, welcome to class. My name is Leanna. Today we'll be discussing pre-colonial West Africa. I included a PowerPoint if you're able to follow along while you're watching the video. I'll let you know when to click the slides. So let's dive right in. I just gotta pull it up. Alright, so second slide says, can you name any countries in West Africa? No Googling, no looking it up. Got my eyes on you. Okay, so the reason I included this is because I feel like it's a little difficult to talk about the history of West Africa without addressing what it actually is. So if you look on the map, the green areas are the sub-Saharan part of the continent of Africa, and that's considered West Africa. Today, West Africa is comprised of 18 countries. If you click to the next slide, those are listed. Those 18 countries in alphabetical order starts Benin, Burkina Faso, Cape Verde, Gambia, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Mali, Mauritania, Nigeria, St. Helena, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Sao Tome and Principe, and Togo. If you want to head over to the next slide, doing a little trivia for you, true or false. Do you think West African towns were primitive and just comprised mainly of grass or mud huts? So, going further, you can stay on this slide, but relative to this question. Currently, the region has been regarded by the Western world as unstable. They've had notable civil wars and military coups in Sierra Leone, Liberia, Nigeria, the Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Burkina Faso. Ultimately, this has not really helped the view of West Africa as a primitive or economically backward society as it's presented a lot of times in the media, especially in the Western world. However, it's important to understand and address that most of these changes were a result of negative European colonialism. So negative predispositions to these countries don't really explain the region's intricate trade or how it intertwined. They had domestic and internal imports. They had merchants, traders, farmers, local. They had debt, capital, and currency. So the West African economy experienced a lot of drastic changes, so they were forced to adapt to both the internal and external influences. It was very organized, but it was also very complex at the same time. If you want to go to the next slide. This was in part because West Africans were generally receptive to new ideas and new people, so they coexisted well with new demands. They were characterized by flexibility and pluralism, and they were not backwards or primitive at all. They actually had technology that was notably more advanced than that of the European settlers, and it was admired by the European settlers. I'm sorry. West Africans had built architecture like walled towers and cities. In the late 19th century, it was compared by a historian to the urban cities in Europe during the Middle Ages, actually. They were also using military strategies that far exceeded that of their European counterparts. That Europeans took advantage of and they made note of and they brought back to their home countries. Warriors were using weapons like spears that were made by an advanced means of metal and pottery production. They used furnaces that could shelt iron. So, early settlers arrived in West Africa around what's now called before Common Era, but it used to be before Christ, so it would be BCE or BC. But around 12,000 BCE, farming, cattle, and camel domestication, ironworking, like the pottery and the spears that we just talked about, agricultural productivity, and trade expanded across the Sahara Desert because they now had more resources and the means to travel across the desert, and it led to the trans-Saharan trade. Major exports like gold were being exchanged for things like horses, salt, and other minerals. And then with the development of the region's economy, centralized states began to form. Beginning about 1000 before Common Era with the Nook Kingdom, they were known for the mineral and pottery casting that we just talked about as well. There was a few other of these powerful empires included the Ghana Empire, found around the Mali area, Mauritania. That was between the 1st and 3rd centuries. The Benin Empire, Empire of Ashanti. There's the Mali Empire along the Niger River. And then if you head to the next page, it reveals what we just talked about. No, West Africans were not primitive or backwards. They had walled cities and technology and towns just like we do today. And then next slide, European contact and colonialism. Around 1445 is when European settlers began to flood the coast. They came dominantly from 6 major regions: France, England, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, and Denmark. The Portuguese also brought in their beliefs in Christianity, which caused a huge influx and influence on the communities. And these travelers were merchants. They were looking to trade major exports like rice, tobacco, metals, sugar, coffee, and indigo. And then if we go to myth or must, the amount of gold mined in West Africa in the pre-colonial era would be worth over $30 billion today in US dollars in our market. And if you just want to hold the slide there. The trade between the European settlers and West Africans eventually introduced the transatlantic slave trade, unfortunately, where Africans were being traded as captives so that the outlying areas had a strong workforce so that they could begin producing their own resources, because the travel and the process of shipping resources overseas was far too costly and not efficient whatsoever. And then if you can't tell the answer to this question from the amount of resources that were being exported out of Africa and traded out of Africa, it's true, even to this day, Africa has most of the Earth's remaining mineral resources and precious metal resources. Those include, not limited to, gold, cobalt, and platinum. So this has been happening as early as 12,000 BCE, where major exports like gold are being exchanged for other resources and coming out of Africa, especially the sub-Saharan area in West Africa. All right, and that concludes today's lesson. Hopefully we can pick up sometime soon after spring break. Thanks for coming. If you want to add anything that you learned that you thought was interesting that I could improve on, feel free to leave it in a comment below. I also included 2 hyperlinks. They are active if you want to look at them. They're TED Talks. I thought they were a little bit relevant on the different, things about West Africa that we just talked about, and, how it's not really talked about what influences they have had on society, but it's a really great culture, and it was really interesting learning about it all semester, so I hope that we can continue to stay on this topic, and thank you for watching so much. Have a good weekend.